Hi, my name is Cameron Gray, and I am the CEO and founder of the Bucks Initiative. And the Bucks Initiative is a not-for-profit um, that celebrates Black art in the modes of TV, film, music, literature, um, and music. And so um, today I was asked by the NBA, and I want to thank them and actually for asking me a part of this program. It's such an honor. Um, and I'm very grateful to be speaking to all of you today. Um, and so today they asked me to talk a little bit about one of the programs that I started uh, in my organization, um, the Buxton Initiative. And today I'm going to break down, to tell you guys the story about how I started it and the process in which it took, but then also the ways I'm really going to try to place emphasis on um, the notions of support and in-kind donations and donations that were given to help support this particular project. Because one thing that I've learned about having a non-for-profit is that it's one thing that you cannot do alone. It requires, support from government entities, uh, you know, your friends, your family members, everybody. Especially if you wanted to again push it to where it uh, where it belongs and and actually impact the communities you want to impact. And so some of that stuff is still in progress, and sometimes it takes time. But my hope and what I'll emphasize right now, but then also what I hope that you all will gather from this conversation is that though it does take time, the work you have to kind of reframe the way you think about it. Is like the work is more important, and you know that the world would probably be better off with the things that you're giving it. So um, there will be a struggle, but I truly believe that if nothing good comes out of without a little struggle, so you kind of have to just keep going forward. So, but with that, the program in question that I'm going to be discussing today is called Black Dot Books. Um, when I first came up with this idea, I was thinking about, you know, in my organization, I had already started um, a couple of different programs of like More Than Monoliths, which is an art program in which I have basically it's like a takeover of my Instagram, and then talking about inviting artists to give having an artist discussion about their work, and then them coming to Ames essentially, and we would do a big roundtable discussion about their work, which is again incredible, and then I still can't believe it's gotten to where it has. And then I also um, had that particular program, and so after that established that program, I was like, okay, how do I start to then bring other aspects of again understanding what I wanted to bring of points I wanted to hit about celebration or bringing the beauty of Black art into predominantly to Black people and Black spaces. Um, because as a kid growing up in a predominantly white space, which is kind of very similar to uh, Ames, in which I am now. I remember while I was in school, I don't think I read my first novel or any type of literature by a Black author until I was in my AP English class in either, I want to say, junior to senior year of high school. And, you know, as my life progressed, then I started learning more about um, Black authors, and it really shook me to see the lack of diversity within the school program and the school curriculum. And I and to this day, I still wonder if like when given that opportunity um, to have that when I was in college, I wonder what kind of person I could have been if I was able to see myself or relate to some of these characters in which I was reading in school. And so understand the importance of, giving the opportunity to seeing, um, you know, Black representation in the literature or the books that you're reading. I immediately thought of like, okay, how can I offer that, give that same connection or offer that kind of connection um, to the people of Ames? Because I also felt that like, not only will this be helping Black kids get the opportunity to read Black stories about themselves, but then also I think it also would allow other students who, due to the banned books that they have been doing atrocious things to, school libraries, this gives them an opportunity to read the other books of authors that aren't banned. So that the beauty about having that particular type of vehicle or creating that vehicle is that no one can touch the library in which I have. I have full control over what books I procure and what books are going to uh, the people. And so uh, again, in lies a lot more freedom in the types of books that you're reading and the types of experiences you're able to have um, because of different subject matter and different authors. Um, so understanding that and under trying to bring humanity, not only showing the humanity of Black individuals, but then of Black stories to hopefully bridge some of those gaps that, you know, living in a predominantly white space could bridge some of those gaps of not confusion, but um, not confusion, but bridge some of those gaps of connection and understanding that could happen in a predominantly white space of where you're not really interacting with other people that are of a different ethnicity than you. These give you a window into their lives without actually having to meet them. So hopefully bringing some more empathy within the black experience and the things that we struggle with on a daily basis just by being Black Americans. Um, and so thinking about wanting to bring that to Ames and wanting to have a program that's centralized around Black literature or literature in itself, um, I started to think, oh, and so then having this thought ruminating in my head, I didn't know how I wanted to present it. And then um, I was talking to my partner at the time, and she brought up the fact of like, hey, why don't you just make because the initial thought of it is like me collecting books, and then I lived at a house at a time, and I was going to then allow people the space of like requesting books from me, so that I'll have the books at home, and then I'll have it in a section, and they can request a book, and then I would then figure out what kind of book would be good for them, and so there would be some type of exchange. But my partner brought up the fact of like, what if you're out of town? What if somebody wants to get a book when you're not there, and all this other stuff? And which made a perfect point. And it's like, how do you start? How do you actually make it? I realized, she brought to my realization that it was actually taking away the accessibility of the actual thing in which I was trying to do. And so, like, how do I start to make this particular project accessible, but also function in the same way that I want it to function? And so then she's like, why don't you just make a free library? Uh, and like, they have them all around the city. It solves that distribution issue that you're having trouble with. It super accessible. People can pick up books whenever they want to. You don't have to really worry about much. In that aspect, it's just building the thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, and so that's kind of where that next step took. And so during that particular period, I was like, where I was thinking about locations of where I could put it, and then also design work. And so then I started sketching what I wanted this thing to look like. And so I kind of designed it the way that a regular free library looks like. So basically having the big stake, and then on it, it would be the free library would be sit on top of the stake. And then when I started drawing it and looking at it, I was like, this doesn't look right, or it doesn't feel the way I want it to feel. And I had to remind myself that I'm a creator. I can make this thing look however the heck I want it to look like. So after having that realization of like, wait, I can just make it. I can make it. A free library doesn't necessarily have to be, a stake and essentially a box. It doesn't have to be. It can be whatever I want it to be. And so then I started to actually do some research on what shape or what object do I want this thing to be. And then I start thinking about, okay, how can the object kind of say everything I want it to say, but then also have connections with, the African story, and also talking about this notion of, passing stories down and the history of that. And so then I started to think about different architectural forms. Um, and the one that I kept coming back to is the obelisk. And like one thing that I like, why I kind of submitted myself in that shape is because when you think about an obelisk, right? In most of the African cultures and the way that it's used not only in Africa but then like or historically in Africa, architecturally it was always a place to signify something, a sacred ground or a holy place. And so one thing that I loved about that, but then also this notion of like talking about a structure that is reaching up into the heavens and then bringing down that knowledge, right? And so when I was thinking about again this particular shape, one thing I loved about it was that's exactly what a free lib or this free library is representing, right? It's talking about these stories, right? We're going back into the African history of the oratory, of people passing stories around to then passing those stories on to other people, so that at the end of it is a collective knowledge that we're having together. And so I love the fact that in this it kind of using that same understanding of a holy item or a holy space. Essentially what this obelisk is representing is this passing along of stories, but there's also a way for our own ancestors to talk back to us, because some of these books, authors like Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, are not here anymore, but yet you're still able to have those conversations with them via their text, and they're still able to pass along their own messages and their own stories to us, and that we can then share those with other people. And so I always love that beautiful poetic um, connection of that shape has, but then also the contents of the actual thing uh, have that beautiful connection, not only with this notion of ancestry, but then also talking about you know books are sacred. They are the things that help us continue on pushing. Our stories are important, and the sacredness of encapsulating all that knowledge um, and capsulating that knowledge, and creating a safe space for that knowledge to exist in. And so like once I kind of found that really nice and beautiful structure, I then started to think about, okay, so like now that I have this thing, how am I going to build it? What it's going to be made out of? All these other questions, and I also realized the biggest part of all of this is like, how do I start to get books? How do I start to do how do what is the next steps of like pushing this idea that I had that just came through just a conversation or a want to keep different programs to keep pushing um, this idea of giving knowledge and providing knowledge for the public. I started to think of like, okay, how would I need some capital to start. And so essentially to begin this particular process, I had reached out for a grant um, that allowed me the capital to then start um, buying the first couple of books, and then also allowed myself to pay myself too, which is also great. And so, and then like through the stipulation of the project in which I was doing, I then had to also, uh, the stipulation of the grant was also make sure that you have in-kind donations and stuff like that. So it's like a match for match program. And so essentially I got that, and I started collecting books. And then I used my platform of my Instagram platform to then, because I had already started a Buxton Initiative um, Instagram page, and I used that particular platform to then start promoting these particular books. And so essentially what I did is I kind of set a goal of like, I would like to make, I would like to uh, collect around $1,000. I think it was $1,000 or $3,000. I can't remember. $1,000 for this particular project that I want working on. And then also I was like, I wanted to make sure that the same way that free libraries work, of where people give books and then people exchange books too, I wanted to make sure that I'm also giving other people the opportunity to sew into this particular project and give me books that they think are is going to be impactful to other to people to be a part of this project too. And so I wanted to make sure my community felt that they could also give me or help me and assist me on this particular project. And so one thing that I also, from understanding that, I learned that like donations don't necessarily have to be monetary, right? It could be in different forms of people giving your time or helping spread the word. And like through this project, that was kind of like something that was really eye-opening to me, because it was like, oh man, I didn't expect that this would be something this big or could be this big. And so essentially, as soon as I came up with the idea, I did a big post on my Instagram page and was like, "Hey, I'm starting to." I basically just told people how they could support. So I basically had at the end, I basically gave the whole premise of what this project is going to be, what the scope is, how big I want it to be, and basically just laying down everything that I kind of laid down to you guys about why I was doing this and what it was going to be, what the size of it and all that kind of stuff. And so then after that, I went to I at the end of that particular long Instagram post, I put in ways that people can help, and so I gave them Cash App, of course, so that Cash App. Um, I gave them told people like if they wanted that they can donate books, they can do it by spreading the word. They can do it by having connections with other different programs and whatnot. And so um, after that, I then began to like press. And so what I mean by that is it's like in order to make sure that this thing stay relevant, I would also like, and it was very hard. I'm not gonna lie to you, like it was very difficult for me to because it requires a lot out of you to keep that thing fresh on someone else's mind. And so that required me doing a lot of posting. And so sometimes I would post maybe once a day for a week, and basically more than that, especially trying to get those funds going and all that kind of stuff. Um, but then also I wanted to reiterate to folks is that I'm always looking for books, right? And so that means and so like during the first couple, I would say the first couple of weeks that I had started that push of, really staying at it, using all my, so like Facebook, Facebook and Instagram really mainly are my uh, two modes of social media. Using those platforms heavy, I it was the reaction to it was astonishing. It was people were telling me, "Look, like somebody told me about your project," and people start sharing it, and like they're like, "Hey, I run this little bookstore, and I would love to donate to your cause," and people were sending me books from all over the country, which is again crazy to see that kind of engagement. Like you you never expect that, and that was something that it kind of shocked me personally. But it's like, man, people really love this particular project, and they really want to see it flourish. Like, and it was really touching to see that I had a community of people who wanted this project to see, understood the importance of it and what it could do for a community, and wanted to put their own time and effort and money into it. And so, understanding, like, taken back of that, and like again having people say like, hey, I can donate this book, what time do you want to meet up? I also have books that I've been trying to get rid of that I really want to donate to you, and all this other stuff. And so it was just it was incredible. And so then that that happened, and then shortly after that, I then started to think, okay, well, if this is wonderful having people, but then like that, I need to, I need to get them more in bulk. Like I need a lot more than what because this is a good net, and people are sending like boxes and boxes of books, so, which is great. But like I need to make sure that I'm have enough to fill up this book project before when we get it set up, so that when it's up, it's ready. We can start putting in all the books that I've collected and fill it up immediately. And so then I was like, a good friend of mine, and this kind of goes to show about how in a lot of these situations you never expect where some of those things are coming from or who will help you. And so I would always tell folks to like, you never know who's going to be that person to pull you over and take you to a place that you could have never expected. So whenever someone is offering to help, always accept it, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes you feel, because you can't do this stuff alone. It's impossible to do it alone. And so always, though it's difficult, sometimes you just have to push past those unnerving or uncomfortable feelings, and uh, accept the blessings that are coming to you. And so my friend heard about it, and she worked at a bookstore, local bookstore in town. And so then I had a conversation with her about it, and even talked to the owners of the particular bookstore, and asked, I was like, hey, I'm working on this project. Is there any way that, I know that when y'all bring books in, if they have a nick or not, cannot be on shelf, you usually, have a box of them and send them back to the company or something to that degree. I was curious, instead of sending them back to the company, would you be open to, um, sending those books to me? Because then I can put them in my book project. And they loved the idea, thought it was incredible, and was like, yeah, sure, of course, Cam. Like, no worries. And so then, like, not only am I, so now that's two avenues of book production that or book allocation that I'm getting. I'm getting, well, three actually. So I'm getting one for myself, books that I'm selecting, two books from friends from around the country, and bookstores around the country, and three from this little local bookstore. And so again, like I'm getting mail constantly, and then also connecting with my friend and being like, hey, we got a box of books for you, so like just let me know when you're ready. And so then yeah, I mean, like even something really beautiful of like when the book 1619 project happened, um, uh, they gave me a signed copy, uh, which was incredible, and it was a really beautiful gift, just to so they appreciate for the work I was doing, and so like I was really grateful for that. And so then, um, as you know, when work started getting busy, but I'm still staying focused on this particular project, start to do different types of builds too, of like trying to design it. I connected with a good friend of mine who um, is a architectural designer, and asked him if he wanted to be a part of this project to help me build the thing and like build up models and whatnot for it. And he agreed, and so that was really amazing to like always again like using the network in which I have and like trying to bring people in to then help do something even more magical because I just love working with people, but then also love to provide um uh I also love to provide um some type of funds for all the help that they've been doing and the help they've been doing for me. And so just because I'm just so grateful and I just love working with my friends on different projects that I think is really beautiful, to have something to collaborate on. And so we're as all these books are coming in, we're starting to build up these different projects. And then I got asked to come on a couple podcasts to talk about the particular project I during that time. So we're designing and trying to figure out the right scale of how tall we want this thing to be, how it's going to function, what things do we need to do, and then that's his own story to begin with, which is kind of crazy. Um, and then as all this is taking place, you know, thing like I'm still thinking about it on a daily basis, trying to like figure out all the nooks and crannies of this particular project. And for some reason, I went to I was at for some reason I was doing something, and I was my I got asked to do an interview with the Ames Tribune. And so it was around, oh wait, I got a little ahead of myself. I'm sorry about that. Um, Around the time of which this thing started to take off, I was trying to think about placement of where I wanted this thing to go. And so I was like, okay, thinking about accessibility, which kind of got me into thinking about this particular project for what it is. I was like, what place can I put this that would be centralized enough in the community so that the people who want to interact with this particular thing without have any issues interacting with it. And the first thing I had to think about when I was thinking about location, the one thing I wanted to really emphasize is like, wait, I'm building this for Black individuals and Black people. So first, I need to figure out where are those pockets within my own Ames community. And so I basically had to look at a census, essentially, and look up where is the most populated Black spaces, demographically Black spaces in Ames currently. And there were two areas in which popped up. Um, and the yeah, Ames is very, very, very. I mean, it's Iowa, and so it's like the population demographic is not as large, but I still wanted to make sure, especially Black spaces, I still wanted to make sure that the people that I'm trying to serve are the ones that they don't have to travel, because I think that's another accessibility issue that um, I don't want, especially when I'm trying to help my community out. I don't want them to have to worry about, oh, we had to catch a bus to go get these particular books for my kids. It's like, no, it's in your backyard essentially. And so through my research, I found that there was there was a there's a space around the Franklin Park area, um, which is like right down the street from my house. That was like the perfect spot. And so then I was like, well, now that I know the area in which I want to put it in, what where should it be? And I couldn't help but think, like, what's basically a centralized part of a community are the parks. And so as soon as I found that, Franklin Park was in that same pocket, I was like, well, this would be the perfect place for it. And so um, I then began the long and arduous conversation with the the city. And so I first started out by basically making a phone call, being like, "Hey, I'm thinking about putting up a sculpture. Is there a way that I can put it up in the park?" Thinking I didn't know the order of things that you have to have permits and all this other stuff. I just thought, well, I see sculptures up all the time. I guess I could just put one up too. It's not gonna hurt anybody. I think it's always gonna benefit the city. And so, excuse me. And so I understanding that I was like, okay, let me call the city. And so that began a long, long, arduous process of me going back and forth with people about, oh, you're supposed to talk to this person, and then they direct me to somebody else, and then they direct me to somebody else, then to just direct me back to the person that the other person directed me to. And so like it showed a lot of disorganization within city government, which is something I didn't know anything about, but I digress. But until so then that they're like, well, you have to bring it to the city council. And so that eve, later on that later on that the next community meeting that there was taking place, council meeting that was taking place, I went in and basically talked to them about the project. Basically, when basically like free for all or free to, I think it's like free to the public or something like that. And basically just told them about the project, all that kind of stuff. They voted to then put the project on like what do you call it? Um like on the docket. Well, not in the docket, but something that they would discuss further in the next meeting. And so then the next meeting happened. I came up, talked a little bit more about the project, just to remind people what I was trying to do. Then they then chose to put it a part of the agenda. And then from that moment, I then sent over uh, a lot of the plans and all that kind of stuff. And I even wrote down a basically a project summary and what it would entail, all that. And then I then connected with two gentlemen, one from the Parks and Rec, and then one from the Brian, who works with the city. And we've been working together in tandem of bringing this project together, which has been a long, arduous uh, like process. And so like during this, as we're beginning to like get all this stuff figured out and putting everything during that, a couple of times that I was there for that meeting, there was a reporter from the Ames Tribune that was also there at those particular meetings as well. And I gave her my contact, and then she called me maybe like a week or two later, and then we had an interview. I did an interview with the Ames Tribune and about the project and bringing that particular project to Ames. And then that's kind of when things kind of went off. And what I mean by that is like I thought it had already reached a peak of engagement, but after that article, it was like I was basically receiving books more than I could even I'm starting to run out of space, which is crazy to think about, but I had to then have a conversation with myself. It's like, how am I going to manage all these books? Like the basement in which I was living at, it could not hold them anymore. I had to think about different ways, and so then it, it it's crazy. And so then I had to think about, where am I storing these things? And so then I had to get like a unit that was like basically to this day it's like almost to the brim. So I'm almost running out of space there, which is crazy. Um, but yeah, it was insane. And then because of that article, I had a connection to. I had worked with the Ames Public Library on a couple of on the More Than Monoliths project, the first season that I did, and it was a great partnership. And they always talked about different ways that they wanted to push that agenda further. Um, and so I did. So, but when they heard about this particular project, they were like, "Hey, we have a back like do we get donations from people all the time to have all the time, and sometimes we don't. We usually put them out for the book sale, and we're actually gearing up for one in. I think this was it was going to be in March. And so they were gearing, so this is in January. So we're gearing up one for March, and we're running through these books, and we were wondering if, our place is kind of disorganized. And if you wanted to come and just peruse our back catalog, essentially books that are going to be going in or that were still left over from the sale that we had, a couple months ago, you can totally do that. I was like, oh, this is incredible. So again, talking about like what I was saying is like allocation. So like, you know, and that goes allocation number four of like my partnership with them. And so now what I was doing is going back there every on a daily basis, sifting through thousands and thousands of books, um, of like just seeing what black books they have available and putting them in a box that then I would always take. So I would basically when got finished, I probably had at least five five to six big boxes of books that I had collected. I think I probably collected maybe at least 200 to 300 maybe books from that allocation, and then to add to again continue this relationship that I had and we had started. Um, from that moment on, I was given access to the book sale before other people were able to get in the book sale. And so essentially what that means is that when I go there, I'm basically come like at least the day before or earlier that morning, and I'll just sift through all the books that they have. And then I'll pick out all the black books. But then also I decided to even like get media too. So like movies and stuff like that, black movies, because I don't know yet how I want those two things to meld, or if I'm going to put films in that, or it's just going to be for my own archive, so that when we do start to show black films for Buxton, we already have a lot of these historically black films already that we can then show the public. Um, and so, but I digress. So like going in and picking books up all the time. And so I've been doing that for at least the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 book sales, which again added to the already surmounting number of books and allocations and donations that I've received. And so yeah, it's wild to think about the progress of this particular project. Like, I didn't see when I first came up with it, I never thought that the engagement that I'm getting from the public would have been this large. I was kind of shocked um, and again grateful for that opportunity. And so, and it all started with just one post, right? Like there wasn't a I didn't have these relationships established already. It was just a thought that I had, and then things started to work out. And so as I'm like speaking to you all about what it means in kind donations, again, like I said in the beginning, it doesn't necessarily always have to be money. It I've Since I started this particular program, I have already collected over 1,000 books that I've collected over the last couple of years that this project has been live. And it's absolutely incredible. Um, and the amount of relationships that I've been able to form, and the people who are able to then donate not only their time, but then their own connections to then help me bring my particular project to fruition, has been such a godsend and a blessing. And so, as you are all going on your own individual journeys of how you're going to bring your own projects and your own not for profits into fruition, I want you to also think about that. Yes, money is important, and money is a driving force in which you need to have something go further than what you started it as. But I want you to start to think about that those kind of donations, monetary donations, are ones that you take and then you use immediately. These in-kind donations that, or these, or the time in which someone gives you, is everlasting. I would even say it is almost more valuable to have those than it is the funds that you garnish. Um, because then it's funny how those things can then bring more money. So it's I want to really reiterate that as you're continuing or starting this journey, start to build those relationships up, because you'll need those more than you'll need the funds, because they'll actually help you get more money. They will actually help you find the resources that you need to bring your project to fruition. They'll help you succeed and go further than you probably would have ever imagined because of those connections. And so you never know. Again, like I said before, money is very finite, but relationships and connections and experiences and conversations you have with folks is priceless. Um, it's one of those things that you really didn't realize how important it was until you got to experience it. Because I was just like, I was in that aspect of like thinking that money was the biggest part. Is like, how do I start to fund this thing? How do I make sure that I have enough funds for it? But then as I got deeper into the project and really understood how the relationships I started helped me again reach certain heights that I didn't realize was possible. I realized those we can find the money, but I can't find these relationships that I've built and garnish have brought so much more joy and ease into my life than I could have ever imagined. Um, and even beyond this project, they even helped me find more connections into other projects that I want to do in the future. And so, you know, it all begins with people who see your cause and believe in the things you're doing and really want you to succeed. And when you find those people, hold on to them, because I promise you, and I'll say this again, is that again that they will help you find the other things that you need. Um, so cherish those small, beautiful, impactful, and powerful relationships that you have, because you'll be surprised of how all the other things that you're looking for and all the other resources that you need will slowly mold themselves into those aspects too as well. Um, and so, yeah, man, like I want you all to know. Before I close, just to give y'all a kind of a update of where things are right now. We're currently in production with a manufacturer to start building the actual like a prototype of this thing, and my hope is that we'll get it up sometime by the end or around the late fall of this year. That's my goal, and I hope y'all keep praying for me about that. Um, but yeah, but as I start to wind down on this talk, I want you all to recognize is that it's going to be a long, long journey to get some of these projects or some of these not-for-profits that you're working on off the ground. But if you stay steadfast, uh, harbor those beautiful relationships that you have with people who believe in your project and who want to see it come to pass, I promise you that you'll have everything that you'll want and need, and your your dream that again was just a dream will become reality. So um, yeah, keep going, and don't ever stop. Um, so again, I want to thank all of you for listening to my crazy story about that, and I really hope that you know my thoughts on how to garner those type of donations and can really help you guys bring what you want out of your own non-for-profits or projects to fruition. And hopefully I look forward to seeing the things that you guys make and um, seeing those things come to fruition, because I again there's nothing better dream to see a dream come to pass. So I believe everyone deserves a moment to feel that and experience that. And so um, again, I want to thank the NBA for allowing me to come speak with you all. And I'm just very grateful for this opportunity. Um, and it's just an honor to be able to speak to you so much about my dream. And I hope that through this conversation that yours will come to as well. Thank you.